December 16, 1944. A conference room in Verdun, France. The air hung thick with tension and stale coffee. Around the polished table sat the most powerful Allied commanders in Europe. Maps covered every surface. Reports stacked in messy piles. Not a single person was smiling. 72 hours earlier, the impossible had happened. German forces had smashed through American lines in the Ardennes forest. 3 entire armies. 250,000 men. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles. They'd punched a bulge 50 miles deep into Allied territory. The First Army was cut in half. The 106th Division had surrendered. 16,000 men gone in a single day. Reports of massacres, burning towns, and chaos piled up faster than anyone could process them. At the head of the table sat General Eisenhower. His face was grim. He asked one question. The question everyone had been dreading. How soon can you counterattack to relieve Bastogne? Silence fell like a curtain. Minds raced through impossible calculations. Bastogne sat in the center of the German offensive. The 101st Airborne was surrounded there. Cut off. Running low on ammunition and medical supplies. They needed relief. Fast. But moving an entire army north in winter, through snow and ice, across supply lines already stretched thin, it would take weeks. Maybe longer. No one wanted to be the first to answer. Then one voice cut through the quiet. I can be there in 48 hours. Heads snapped toward him. General George Patton sat forward in his chair. His face was calm, matter of fact. Some officers exchanged glances. Was he grandstanding? Patton's Third Army was 100 miles south, heavily engaged in its own offensive toward the Saar. To disengage, pivot 90 degrees north, and attack in 2 days? It was beyond optimistic. It was impossible. But Patton wasn't bluffing. And he was the only one in that room who'd seen this coming. To understand why, you have to go back 11 days earlier. December 5, 1944. While most Allied commanders were focused on their push into Germany, one intelligence officer was losing sleep. Colonel Oskar Koch served as Patton's G2. His job was tracking enemy movements. And what he was seeing terrified him. German divisions were shifting, moving toward the Ardennes. Units previously identified in other sectors were disappearing from the line, then reappearing farther north. Radio traffic was spiking in all the wrong places. Panzer divisions that should have been depleted were somehow reforming. Koch charted every movement, every intercept, every prisoner reports. A disturbing pattern emerged. The Germans were massing for something big. Not a defensive stand. An offensive. A major one. He estimated they were gathering 8 to 10 divisions. Maybe more. All aimed at the weakest part of the Allied line. The Ardennes forest, where green American divisions held a quiet sector. Koch took his analysis to higher headquarters. The response was dismissive. The Germans were finished. Everyone knew that. They were out of fuel, out of men, out of time. This was probably just normal troop rotation. Local reinforcement. Nothing to worry about. Allied intelligence at Supreme Headquarters saw the same data. They concluded the Germans were too weak to attack. Every piece of evidence got bent to fit that narrative. But Koch brought his reports to one man who listened. General Patton studied the intelligence. He looked at the maps. He saw what Koch saw. On December 9th, he gave a quiet order to his staff. Start planning. They thought he was crazy. The Third Army was days away from a major offensive of its own. Resources were committed. Men were tired. But Patton wanted contingency plans for a 90-degree turn north. His staff obeyed. They began charting routes, positioning supply dumps, earmarking divisions that could disengage fastest, calculating road capacity and march times. The work was painstaking, detailed, secret. Other officers heard rumors and shook their heads. Patton preparing for a German offensive? In December? While everyone counted down to Christmas. It made no sense. But they did the work anyway. By December 12th, Patton's Third Army had 3 separate plans ready. 3 different routes north. 3 different configurations depending on where help was needed. While the rest of the Allied command relaxed and planned holiday dinners, one army had detailed attack orders sitting in a safe. Quick thing before we continue. Hit subscribe if you want more incredible WWII stories like this. We're building something special here, and you'll want to be part of it. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, that explosion came. German artillery opened up along an 80-mile front. The barrage was thunderous, overwhelming. Searchlights bounced off low clouds to create artificial moonlight. Then the panzers rolled forward. 3 entire armies. The 6th SS Panzer Army in the north, the 5th Panzer Army in the center, the 7th Army in the south. They smashed into surprised American positions. Green divisions that had never seen combat suddenly faced veteran SS troops and Tiger tanks. Communications broke down almost immediately. Phone lines cut. Radio nets jammed. Higher command got scattered. Confused reports. Small counterattack, they thought. Local trouble. Nothing serious. But as the day wore on, the truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a counterattack. This was an offensive. A massive one. The 106th Division was encircled. The 28th Division was shattered. By nightfall, German forces had advanced up to 20 miles. Entire regiments had ceased to exist. The numbers were staggering. Thousands captured. Thousands more killed or wounded. At 3rd Army headquarters, the reaction was completely different. Patton was in his office when the first reports arrived. He read them carefully. Then he turned to Oskar Koch. "You were right," he said. His voice was calm. He didn't sound surprised. He immediately called his staff together. "We're executing the contingency plans," he ordered. While other headquarters were still trying to understand what was happening, Patton's army was already preparing to move. The emergency that everyone else had just discovered was one he'd been ready for since December 9th. 3 days later came the meeting at Verdun. So when Eisenhower asked his impossible question, Patton had an answer ready. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours, he said. The room stared at him. Eisenhower's chief of staff spoke up. "Don't be fatuous, George." Fatuous. Silly. Foolish. This was no time for jokes. If Patton promised this and failed, it could cost thousands of lives. Make the entire situation worse. Patton didn't flinch. "This is no call for a show," he said quietly. "I've already given the orders." The room absorbed this in stunned silence. The German offensive that had shocked every other Allied commander? Patton had anticipated it. He'd been expecting exactly this for 11 days. Eisenhower studied him. The Supreme Commander knew Patton. Knew when he was serious. "All right," Eisenhower said finally. "Get moving." Patton walked to the nearest phone. He dialed his headquarters. 2 words, "Play ball." Those words triggered everything. The carefully positioned supplies. The pre-planned routes. The divisions were already alerted. Orders flashed through communication channels. What seemed like a miracle was really just a preparation meeting opportunity. The movement began immediately. Patton's 3rd Army executed a 90-degree turn. 3 divisions. Then 6. Eventually 10. More than 133,000 vehicles. Thousands of tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces. They disengaged from their positions in the Saar, pivoted north, and drove toward the Bulge. The logistics were staggering. 3 main roads carried the entire army. Traffic control was critical. 1 breakdown, 1 accident, and everything jammed up. But the plans were detailed. Every division knew its route, its timing, its objectives. The weather fought them every mile. Snow fell thick and heavy. Ice made roads treacherous. Temperatures dropped below 0. Men rode in open trucks, fingers raw from cold. Engines froze. Vehicles slid off roads. But they kept moving, day and night without stopping. While other Allied commands were still organizing, still trying to coordinate, the 3rd Army was already attacking. By December 22nd, lead elements were engaging German forces south of Bastogne. They'd covered 100 miles in terrible conditions in less than 4 days. What seemed impossible was simply detailed execution of plans drawn up before the crisis started. The fighting was fierce. Villages became killing grounds. Tank battles erupted in frozen fields. German forces fought hard to maintain their corridor. They threw everything at Patton's advance. But the Third Army kept pushing. The 4th Armored Division led the way. Its commander, Major General Hugh Gaffey, drove his tankers relentlessly forward. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne was holding on. Supplies were almost gone. Ammunition rationed. Medical supplies exhausted. When the Germans demanded surrender, General McAuliffe sent back one word: nuts. The paratroopers believed relief was coming. They just had to hold on. At 4:45 p.m. on December 26th, tanks from the 4th Armored Division broke through. Physical contact made. The siege was broken. Exactly when Patton had promised. The Battle of the Bulge would rage for another month. It became the bloodiest battle American forces fought in Europe. 19,000 killed. 70,000 wounded or captured. But it could have been catastrophic. If Bastogne had fallen, the Germans could have reached the Meuse River, split the Allied armies, forced a negotiated peace in the West. Patton's rapid response disrupted everything. But here's what haunts military historians. How did everyone miss this coming? Why were the warnings ignored? The uncomfortable truth is someone hadn't missed it. Oskar Koch had tracked every division, every movement, every signal. He'd predicted not just the attack but where it would hit. His reports went up the chain of command. Everyone dismissed them. Why? Because the war was almost over. Everyone knew that. Germany was beaten. Every piece of intelligence got interpreted through that lens. The enemy was too weak, too depleted, too desperate. Disturbing signals were explained away. Koch's analysis reached multiple headquarters. Most treated it as unlikely, overly cautious. But one commander took it seriously enough to bet his army on it. Patton used precious time and resources preparing for a crisis that might never come. And when the crisis came, that preparation meant he could do what no other force could. Official histories praise Patton's achievement. The speed, the audacity, the execution. But those 11 days of preparation are footnotes. Oskar Koch's name rarely appears in the popular accounts. His accurate prediction gets overshadowed by the narrative of surprise. Here's the real lesson. Intelligence has value only when leaders act on it. Preparation isn't glamorous. It doesn't get parades or headlines. But in a crisis, it's the difference between chaos and execution. Most commanders heard Koch's reports. They concluded the Germans couldn't do what the evidence suggested. One commander looked at the same information and prepared for everyone else being wrong. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't just lucky. He believed in planning for the worst. He trusted someone who saw what others refused to see. The relief of Bastogne gets attributed to courage and firepower. Those mattered absolutely. But none of it was possible without the work done before the first shot was fired. That's why Patton could make an impossible promise. That's why what looked like a miracle was really just being ready. The quiet work done in those 11 days before the world exploded.